You can find links to all our guests' books on the products page at creativityfound.co.uk. Just visit creativityfound.co.uk/products and books.
So I took temp jobs here and there. I freelanced for Elle and Vogue, and I was also a waitress and a barista at Starbucks. I auditioned for off-Broadway shows. I did some professional singing. I just basically did everything. So it was difficult, and I didn't find a friendship group for a very long time. I think it took me about, I'd say, 7 years. Like, I need something else in my life, because if I don't have that something else, I am just gonna resent having children. So then I had to teach myself how to write a novel. I found out this kind of a family secret, and then it all basically catapulted into me going, I'm gonna write my first book.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Open Stage Arts drama and singing classes for adults. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We'll explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits, and how their creative lives enrich their practical, necessary, everyday lives. For this episode, I'm speaking with Tetyana Denford, a Ukrainian-American author who lived for some years in the UK. Becoming a mother meant that writing was put to the back of the queue of things she should be doing. But a dinner-time planning chat with her husband sent Tetyana on a soul search about her future life and future self. Let's find out what came of that deep delve. Hi, Tetyana.
Hello, Claire.
How are you?
As good as I can. I'm taking every day as it comes.
As most people are.
Yeah.
You have a busy life with family and commitments, again, as lots of people do. How do you express yourself creatively?
I will carve out moments for myself as often as possible. Wendy Mack, who's an illustrator, I saw the other day that she was actually on a train and she was looking out of the window and she saw these amazing clowns and she could not let it go. So she actually drew on her arm and her hand the clouds so she can take them with her. And I think that, for me, is a great representation of what creatives right now are trying to do. They're trying to hold on to these moments as often as they can, even if it's, 2 lines that you think of. I say write it down. I have to. Otherwise, I feel like I'm letting the world get in the way of what I want to do.
That's a really interesting outlook and approach to it. Did you have positive creative experiences as a child, at home, at school?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go back there. Only because, I love where I am now. But I really began my kind of creative journey when I was sat at home reading books and drawing and writing little stories to myself, because I was an only child and I was a little bit left to my own devices. My parents were both working and they're great people and I'm really close to them, but there's only so much that they wanted to kind of sit and play with me. They were very focused on work and stuff. So I just wrote and I imagined and I read, and then I started writing poetry and I entered short story competitions. And my parents were always they always have been and will always support the arts, but when it came to me, they were very encouraging. They did not want me to just focus on things that would make me successful financially, and they really instilled in me that doing something creative that I loved was really important, because they saw how it made me feel. So those experiences from the home kind of then bled into me finding people that were like-minded at school. and finding teachers that I really connected with. I had an amazing mentor in high school, this English teacher, Mr. Allen. He was very encouraging of any kind of writing that I did. And he would meet with me one on one and give me kind of little coaching on how to write certain things, or the difference between memoir and nonfiction. And it's just, yeah. So all of that was just the formative time in my life where I thought, well, that's just who I am, not just what I do, you know.
It sounds like you did have some good influences
Yeah.
there. What direction did you take for further education? And did you know what you wanted to do? Not that it was the most important thing, but did you know what you did want to do in the world of work?
No, I didn't know for a long time because I was a little bit of the kind of person that would try everything. And I really didn't know what I wanted to do until I was in my third year in college. And I always find it funny that people ask kids in high school, well, what do you want to study? They're still babies. They don't know. They won't know until maybe they leave college. And even then, nobody knows really, because we're constantly evolving and learning as human beings, as we should be. So I did a lot of creative stuff. I went to a liberal arts college after high school because it offered so many different things for me to try. So it was perfect for me. I studied languages, I studied poetry analysis, I studied philosophy and religion and all of those very marketable things in a modern world, which you do nothing with really. But no, I I tried a little bit of everything. I studied abroad, and when I left college, I went to live and work in New York City, and I spent time there. My first job was in television ratings analysis. I mean, it was just a steady job, but after a year of that, I got really stifled. I felt like I wasn't being the kind of creative young person that I imagined that I could be. So I took temp jobs here and there. I freelanced for Elle and Vogue, and I was also a waitress and a barista at Starbucks. I auditioned for off Broadway shows. I did some professional singing. I just basically did everything. I just really wanted to find out who I was and what I wanted to do. And I think that should really try and be encouraged, I think, with especially our generation. Like they need to feel like they're not pigeonholed into one specific direction. I think especially in America that there's a tendency to do that. It's like, oh, do a course that will make you money eventually as an adult. I'm like, well, yeah, okay, money's great, but it's not everything. So
Yeah, I completely agree. It goes back to what you said about, not necessarily knowing what you want to do at college. It doesn't mean you know what you want to do afterwards either. And I think the beauty of this podcast is that we get to express that once you do make a decision in your younger years, you don't have to stick with it forever.
and that's what people used to be like. They used to have one career until they worked themselves to death at like 65 years old, and then they sat around going, oh, finally I'm done. Whereas now we are so lucky and to be part of such a modern world where so many things are possible for so many people. Companies aren't like taking you just because you look good on paper. They want life experience. They want people to try new things, and they want very well-rounded and curious people. I always tell my kids, you should stay curious for your whole life as a human being. Stay curious, because that's ultimately how we learn. We should always be learning about who we are and what we want to do, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Going back then, you did go into advertising
Mm-hmm.
for a longer time. How did that come about? How did you enjoy that? It sounds like a very corporate role.
So what happened? So I was still freelancing. I was still doing off Broadway shows, but I was living hand to mouth. And in the city, living like that, it's very, very difficult. And I probably could have persevered it if I wanted to stick with professional singing, but I think I'd had kind of a little bit enough of that. I was so tired of doors being closed all the time and just me not looking a certain way for certain roles and whatever. So I just wanted to try something new. And I was still writing on the side, but then I had a friend who said that advertising isn't a bad way to make some money, and sometimes it's really creative depending on what position you're in. And me being the control freak that I am and always will be, I actually really like a position where I organize people and I plan events and I put together presentations and all of that. So I was quite good at that even in college. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just have a look around. And then I started getting some very short lived executive assistant positions. Through a recruitment agency, I found an advertising company that was looking for an assistant to the global CEO. And they were very well known as a great company to work for. So I got in there and I had the most amazing time. And I'm still friends with him. His name is Charles. He was the best boss ever, ever. He was just absolutely kind and generous and funny and patient, and he just really made it so enjoyable. And I loved other people I worked with, and I liked the position because it was a little bit creative. So that part I had autonomy over, sort of, but then also there was a very standard way of doing things, which I don't mind either. And yeah, it was good money and it offered a sense of security, and I enjoyed it. And I ended up working there for about a year, 2 years. But in the meantime, I met who then became my husband. But my husband was working in the same company, but in the UK office. So I stayed with the company. I married the guy, and then we moved over to the UK. And because I didn't know anybody, I didn't have any kind of jobs lined up when we moved over. I just did temp jobs for advertising agencies, and they were fantastic. They were great, decent money, really fun people to work with. They work hard, they play harder, especially in the UK. And it was really fun. Definitely not something that I knew was going to be a career, but I was good at it, and it afforded me some kind of financial flexibility to just have my writing going on the side.
Did you meet your husband to be, who was working in the UK office, in the US before he worked in the UK office?
No, so he was in the UK office at the time, and he has like a very long career, still does, in media and advertising. He's brilliant at his job. He now has his own company, but back then he was working for the same company, and he came over to New York for a work dinner. And he was just really funny, and yeah, and then now here we are, 3 kids and 15 years later. So so I highly recommend working at an advertising firm. You might find somebody interesting.
Other than the working situation, how did you find your time in the UK, having come from everything you knew in the US? What was life like for you?
Because I'd lived in New York City for 10 years at that point before we moved over to the UK, I was actually looking forward to the change. I'm not somebody who sits in one spot for very long. I want to see as much of the world as possible. And I really wanted to kind of challenge myself with living in a different country for a little while. And it was amazing. I loved it, and I still love the UK. I became a citizen because, it's just part of who I am now. It was much more polite in a lot of ways compared to New York. New York basically makes you earn your place. It does not care who you are, how much money you have, how nice you can be. They're basically like, just put in the graft and maybe we'll let you in. Whereas in the UK, especially in London, when we first moved, we were in central London, and I was working for these different agencies, and the friendship groups were very closed off to a new person. And plus I'm American, so that doesn't help. So I'm trying to get to know people, and they are very much like, not so much. They'll be really polite. So they're not like New Yorkers that are very unfiltered. Like Londoners are very nice, but they're like, no, thank you. So so it was difficult, and I didn't find a friendship group for a very long time. I think it took me about, I'd say, 7 years. But it taught me a lot. And I'm not somebody who says no to a challenge. I'm willing to push the limits of what I can do just to learn about who I am and what I can experience in this life and what lessons it's going to teach me. So I still love it though. I love so much about the UK. It was a lovely experience. I do miss it. We haven't been back for 3 years.
Yeah. So you mentioned about doing a bit more writing for yourself. How did perhaps those experiences of your time in the UK, and generally, how did that help you get back to writing for yourself?
Well, when I moved to the UK, I was trying to still keep up with my writing. So what I did was I started a blog back when Blogspot was still running, and it was called I Spy with My London Eye. And it was an American's perspective on life in London and just like the mess that it feels like sometimes, and the loneliness and the frustration and the excitement and all of it. That kind of kept me in practice. And then I stopped for a little while and we started having kids, and I got really distracted. And as a lot of women do when they choose to have children, they put themselves aside. So, yeah, I just felt like, oh, let me just focus on this. But the danger with that, for me in particular, I think if I am not truly fulfilled, I'm a terrible parent. And I only learned that after around my when my third kid was born. I kept helping them out. So I was pregnant consistently for 5 years, basically. And which, I mean, they are wonderful, but it's a lot of sacrifice. And like, I need something else in my life, because if I don't have that something else, I am just gonna resent having children. So when my third came out and everything was, we're all happy and healthy and whatever, and it was about probably 8 months in, I remember my husband and I sitting down at the beginning of the year. We sometimes have these dinners at the beginning of the year, and we go, what do we want to do? What's our plan separately and also together? What do we want to achieve? And I think it's a great way, like, to kind of focus yourself instead of just drift around and kind of not know what you're doing, especially when you're in the swamp of early motherhood. It's just a little bit, you can't get your bearings. And he said, what do you want to do now that the kids are getting a bit older and stuff? And meanwhile, he's traveling a lot, so he has his stuff figured out. These kids are little. We don't have much help. So I'm like, I don't know. I could just sit around and just keep having babies. And then I heard myself say that, and I was like, yeah, that's a really safe thing for me to say. And it's very easy to say that because you're in the rhythm. Of course, you want to keep doing that because it's wonderful. It's cozy. It's hard, but also like you don't have to necessarily achieve anything else. You're doing this. It's hard work. But then I was like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. So I started writing again, and I started writing for a blog zine called Selfish Mother, and it kind of got me practicing. Thing is that it wasn't on my own website, so they kind of took my stuff and published it on their site, which is great for them. But I was like, I want ownership of my own stuff. I want to figure out what I can do. Slowly I began writing. I started going to events and started meeting people within that kind of industry, very creative. And some of these events were all like fake crap. It's all like just for appearances. Everybody just wants to feel famous for 5 minutes and then they leave the event. I'm not a big fan of that, but I learned along the way. And I would say to anybody looking at those events going, oh, they're so fancy and I hope I belong. Like, yeah, no, they are not the be all end all. Like, you can do it. You can meet people that are creative, that are not like these fancy influencers that think they're all hot shit. And but the practice for me was the thing, and then I started using my Instagram as practice, writing little pieces. Yeah, okay, I was putting up outfit shots for like a lot of it. But then I was like, what am I doing with my social media? I want to use it for something. And I started reaching people with my writing. And then I started gaining a little bit of momentum. And around that time, it was in 2015, 16, I found out this kind of a family secret. And then it all basically catapulted into me going, I'm going to write my first book. I'm going to write a novel. I have this amazing thing that I just found out about my family. Why don't I write a novel? And then that's it. And then the doors opened. And back then, I was like, oh, I hope one day I can write and publish a book. Now, I'm like, I am where I wanted to be, however many years ago.
Creativityfound.co.uk is the place to go to find workshops, courses, supplies, kits and books to help you get creative. So if you're looking for your own Creativity Found experience, go have a browse to see what's on offer so far. And if you can help adults to find their new creative passion, please get in touch on social media or through the contact details on the website. As well as the writing side of things, that's an interesting look on social media. We have lots of contradictions within ourselves about what we might be doing with social media. And for some people, they think, oh, I have to do social media because I want to tell the world about this creative thing I'm doing.
Yep.
And for other people like yourself, the social media helped as a practice of the creative thing you were doing and building on it. So that's a really interesting viewpoint of social media.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm glad you said that, because these are two separate things, I think. I think too many creatives think that producing every day in this unnatural way to produce content, to produce engagement, to produce likes in order to promote their stuff, that kind of melts into them thinking that that's their art, that that's their work. And I do not subscribe to that way of thinking. I think social media is a very different beast, and it is a machine that you can use as practice or engagement. But your work, if social media exploded tomorrow, surely you have your work separate, and that's the thing that you work on no matter what.
Well, it's like if you go for a walk or if you do some exercise and you forget to put your watch on, you think, oh, I didn't do the exercise, but you did do the exercise and your body's still benefiting from doing the exercise. You just haven't recorded it, but it makes you feel like you haven't done it.
That is a great way to describe it. 100%. Yeah.
Anyway, that was fabulous. Back on topic. Get back to the novel. So this, you've said about a family secret, and this was an historical novel that you then began to write. How was that different to the blogs that you'd been writing? And what did that process then open up for you, perhaps?
The novel, I never imagined that I would write a historical fiction novel, but it just came really naturally. It just came flooding out. And I thought, well, I'm the only person, I'm an only child, I'm the only person that can write this information down. And at first, obviously, it was like, draft upon draft upon draft. In the beginning, I was like, yay, I wrote a book. And I was like, no, this is not a book. It's a story. It's an account. It's 400 pages of just one thing and happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So then I had to teach myself how to write a novel. I was proud of it, but I knew it kind of needed a little bit of help. But then I thought it was good enough to submit. And I think it was like the 8th draft or something. And which is not even that many, but people go through 30, 40 drafts. But I thought, okay, I think it's compelling enough to submit. And I set myself months of making sure my query letters were on point, that my synopsis was good. And that's really difficult. Anyway, I was like, you can write a novel, great, and it could be really good. But all of this other stuff, in order to kind of approach the industry with, you have to have it all as a really good X Factor kind of package. Because if you don't have that, nobody's going to read your work. Honestly, like, they could still reject you, but they could still read it and go, that's great, not for me. And so I kind of really started realizing that I might have a shot at this, or I was really proud of my writing. So I went forward and with it, and I submitted, and within the first, I'd say 3 months, I got 12 full requests, which is, but it's like, it doesn't happen very often. I was like, oh, I'm getting somewhere. And eventually, the full requests eventually came out to be, this is not for us, but you have a talent for this, and I can't wait to see other work that you're going to put out. And at first I was like, oh, but it didn't discourage me, because I had actually very in-depth conversations with agents who I'm still connected to, who were so supportive and so lovely. And it told me something. I was like, I wouldn't say no if a big agent came knocking on my door or I got a publishing deal, obviously. But at the same time, I was like, them saying no does not mean that I don't have a shot at becoming an author and publishing my books. And that's when it hit me. And this is because of where I am now, is because I reframed my perspective. After I wrote the novel and after I got rejections, even though everyone was like hugely supportive, I said, you know what? I'm going to start self-publishing. Because two agents actually said revise, rewrite, and send it back. And they wanted me to change certain parts of the story, where I was like, wow, I know this could be better, but also this is partly a family story that I've helped fictionalize. I can see it in my head, how I wanted it to look. Sorry, how I wanted it to read, how I wanted the cover to look. I saw it all. And I saw the title and how it was spelled out and everything. Like, so I just knew I had to put it out there. And that's not me post rationalizing. Like, I could have kept going. I could have kept submitting. But that basically, to try and make this story shorter, those rejections and still that support told me that I could actually start self-publishing, which then put me on a journey of, when this book goes out and I started making money, I was like, I'm going to start writing more. But the reason I started writing books of poetry is because, and not novels, is because my grandmother died a month after Motherland, my first novel, was published. And I was in such deep grief that all I could do was write small pieces as like a catharsis for myself. And I thought this might resonate because it was in the middle of a pandemic. People were dying. People were losing family members. And my first book of poetry, a collection of poetry, was about grief and the conversations that I was having with myself and with this entity that I called grief. So Motherland basically propelled me not only into these collected kind of poetry books, into this genre, but it also propelled me to self-publish still, because I loved the process. I loved learning about it. And I'm also aware that I have the luxury of taking time to be able to write and self-publish. Actually, being traditionally published or traditionally agented with a book is much easier in a lot of ways for people, because they don't have the time to sit and like do all the legwork. Anyway, so Motherland basically just really pushed me into like taking control of more of my work.
Yeah, how did you get along with self-publishing with things like cover designs?
We now live in a world where you can publish a book for free. I mean, you can put together a PowerPoint presentation, put it on Amazon, get them to make a cover, which is free, and there is literally no cost to you apart from time.
I see.
So they have a cover creator within KDP, which a lot of people don't realize, and it's actually really easy to use. Amazon is very, not only user friendly, but the KDP group or the staff will talk to you personally on email if you're having any kind of issues. The stigma with self-publishing, unfortunately, even if it's an amazing book, if it doesn't look like a regular book, people will go, yeah, self-publishing is a bit crap, isn't it? I say to anybody, if you're going to self-publish, please save up some money and hire a cover designer, because it will make all the difference. So the art is never going to be as perfect as going with like Random House's, printing company, but it's pretty darn good. And now KDP is doing hardcover options, and you can have matte option, glossy option. So it's becoming very um, it's becoming easier for people, but still it's work. You have to just kind of figure it out. So I found my cover guy Amir through a company called 99 Designs, and you can hire freelance graphic designers for anything. And I specifically wanted somebody who's worked on book covers, and I really liked his past work. So I talked to him, and he basically takes my sketches and my ideas and makes them into something. And I was really proud of Motherland. And that was the money that for me was well spent. I saved up, I used that for the cover. Everything else I did through Amazon. I would like actually to be in independent bookstores, and that's what you get with an agent and a publicist. You get to kind of filter out your books into lots of different places. I would much rather an indie bookstore, but right now this is my option.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So we touched on conversations with grief, and you've continued that with a few other books. Tell me about the next ones.
Okay, so Conversation with Grief came out last, I don't know, April? No, maybe? Oh God, I forget. Oh my God.
It's 2021, 22. It's just
I
one
know.
whole year.
It's like what I forget my children's names quite often at this point. No, so after that came Conversation with Motherhood. I wanted to create books based on universal themes. So motherhood came quite easily to me. I get really tired of seeing very typical tropes within motherhood. It's the lazy mother, it's the messy mother, it's the drinking mother, it's the party mother, it's the young mother, it's the trendy mother, it's the mama boss mother. Like, so over it. I think you can be a mother without even having kids. You can have a mothering energy. You can mother the people. If you're a carer for the elderly, you are a mother. We are all mothers in different ways. So I wanted to write something that was all this human side to motherhood. And there's grief in motherhood. This is the thing, like all of these things are kind of intertwined. And after motherhood, I thought the most universal thing that we need to be reminded of right now is love. And that's the one that's coming out next in February, right before Valentine's Day. And love is not the absence of grief, it is a marriage with grief. We cannot experience love if we have not experienced grief. It's all of these things are so intertwined. And that has been the absolute joy of me writing these books, because they're like little companions, you know? So I just think to have something that's portable, to have something that you can dip into and out of, to have pieces that resonate in different ways for different people, I'm just really honored to be able to do that. And I love doing it.
Yeah, brilliant. So do you call yourself an author now?
Yeah. I didn't for a long time. I didn't even call myself a writer when I started. And my husband, he is always a firm believer in, if you have the energy of believing in something that you're doing, people will respond to that energy. If you feel it and you believe it, you will be it. So the energy that I had, when I started writing seriously the novel in 2015, 16, I was just, oh, yeah, I'm writing something. Are you a writer? I don't know. And then finally my husband was like, what do you do? You write. And when you write, you might make yourself an author. So just and that's why my handle changed even on social media. So now it's Tetyana Writes, because that's what I do. But it's only when I published Motherland, and it was very successful, and it still makes me money. And I was so proud of it, but I wasn't there yet. I'm like, can I be an author? But then I was like, but I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. I have just published my first book. I'm an author. And the thing is that as soon as you start believing that you're a writer or that you're an author, like suddenly the energy shifts a bit and you are more confident in producing more work and publishing more work and talking to other authors and writers, because suddenly you're like, I'm not less than they are just because I self-published, or just because the publisher didn't buy the book from my agent, I'm still an author. I'm still as valid as you are. I may not have won any awards and I may not be on any short lists or long lists, but I'm still an author and I'm really proud of my work. And I think people really connect to that. I want to get people to believe in themselves more. Doesn't matter what stage they are in their career, there's always going to be that debilitating imposter syndrome. But I think you have to believe in your work and kind of shut out the noise sometimes.
Brilliant. Absolutely agree.
I'm so bossy.
Well, you're saying it like it should be said. It's a whole creativity found ethos there, all summed up very nicely. Thank you.
Oh.
We touched on the fact that it's 2021, 22 at the moment, and we've all been in a slightly different way of living because of lockdowns and the pandemic, obviously. Do you think that's affected your writing flow, or has that any way impacted your creative flow?
Definitely, but perversely, I think it's been a good thing. And I say that as somebody who always has to keep busy. I always have to keep writing. I always think, oh, I have to set up my next book and stuff. But I think it is absolutely unnatural, or it's becoming unnatural for creatives to be expected or to force themselves to produce every single day. I don't know what the reasoning is, but I will say that social media has absolutely exacerbated that, because in a pandemic, who do we turn to? What do we turn to? Artists, art, books, painting, music, movies. But as creatives, we cannot put that all the time on ourselves, because I think it takes away from our work and our art. And I think that has to be separate. And I genuinely think that so many creatives right now are saying, I'm going to take a break from social media. Why? Because they're burnt out. And that's not healthy for the work that you ultimately are doing and should be doing, the work that it is you. I see so many authors out there that maybe conflate the their work with social media posts, and I get that that's maybe part of their job to kind of push their book out there, but that's not who they are. I don't associate their work with their social media engagement at all, genuinely. And stepping away from me was really good, because I had to work in a notebook sometimes. I forced myself to just write on my blog pieces, and I think also it forces you to think, actually, Twitter and Instagram are very small slices of the world, really. I think if you are proud of your work, reach farther. Do something that will nurture you. Do your work outside of these little boxes. Because if this did not exist, hopefully you would still be doing what you're doing and be proud of it.
Definitely. Thank you. Tetyana, how can people contact you or connect with you?
So,
Talking of social media.
yes, I am quite heavily on social media. So I'm on Twitter as Tetyana Writes. I am on Instagram as Tetyana Writes. I have a website, tetyanadenford.com, which has book updates, other updates, places you can buy my books. I am on YouTube with The Craft and Business of Books, which is a show that interviews editors, agents, authors about what the process is to be either self-published, traditionally published, kind of lifts the lid and goes behind the scenes, which I very much enjoy. And I think it's been in development for a while, but I'm going to create little courses for people on self-publishing. And also, if you're going to approach agents to get traditionally published, I'm going to cover things like how to motivate yourself, what drafting is like, how to set up query letters, how to carry yourself on your social media as somebody who wants to be taken seriously as an author. So all of that, I'm like really excited to do. There'll be like little mini courses, maybe half an hour long. So, and it's basically an offshoot of the Craft and Business of Books. So if people go onto there, they'll get a sense of kind of what I'm like.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much, Tetyana.
Oh, you're welcome. This has been a joy.
Thank you, for me too. Creativity Found is an Open Stage Arts production. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe, rate and review. If you would like to contribute to future episodes, visit ko-fi.com/creativityfoundpodcast. If you contact any of the artists featured, sign up to their workshops or buy their products, don't forget to mention Creativity Found Podcast. On Instagram or Facebook, follow @Creativity Found Podcast, where you'll find photos of our contributors' artwork and be kept abreast of everything we're up to.